The northeastern U.S. has been thrust deep into the icebox. Mount Washington, New Hampshire, down to minus 44 Fahrenheit at this hour. That is not wind chill. That's the actual air temperature. That footage was from a little over 1 hour ago. Looking at the Aviation Weather Center products, there it is, the temperature minus 44 Fahrenheit, and the winds 91 miles an hour sustained, gusting to 99 miles per hour. That's a look at the infrared imagery at this hour, some very cold temperatures in the mid-levels. And we can see the bands of cold air advection stratocumulus. Those are extending well out into Maine. Then there's a little subsident area on the shadow side of the White Mountains and the Adirondacks. And then we pick up some lake effect, well, that would be sea effect stratocumulus offshore as that very cold air hits the warm currents off of the East Coast. We can add in some of the station plots. Down in Boston, we're looking at 11 degrees at this hour, about 19 north of Philadelphia, 14 at Pittsburgh. But as you head north, it gets much colder. The zero line, that appears to be running from southern Maine. Looks like the entire state is below zero. The zero line continues to about Albany, and then down the New York Thruway, kind of arcing up towards Toronto, and then up towards, Georgian Bay? I forgot. And you can see some very cold temperatures up there in Montreal, near minus 15. And I should point out that this is the AWIP system used by Weather Service forecasters, so you're seeing the same data that the Weather Service offices have. So let's move on to the surface analysis. This is not AWIPS. We will circle back to AWIPS a little bit later. This is digital atmosphere and some of my own graphical forecast work. And what we see here is a lot of cold air advection into the northeastern U.S. The blue lines, those are going to be 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. The 540 line in purple going right through there, that tends to delineate freezing, or I should say liquid versus frozen precipitation. And down to the south, warmer temperatures with higher thickness values. So we're seeing a little bit of everything, all the important details, isobars, thickness, fronts, precipitation, and so on. We can see that most of the dynamically generated precip has moved offshore along that cold front, and we're seeing a lot of intense lake effect snows as well as some cold core convection. That's going to be shallow convection, but it's close to this cold pool over Quebec. And of course, offshore, we've got the streaks of sea effect, cold air advection, stratocumulus. Okay, let's start out and see what we got here. Large high pressure area, 1038, 1039 millibars. East of that, we've got the northerly flow, and pretty much all of the Gulf Coast region has offshore flow. So that's going to be kind of a cold pattern there. We are getting the return flow in Texas, although that's coming off the plateau regions. However, some strong downslope warming. In fact, 61 degrees there at Pueblo at this hour, and lots of 40s all the way up to Montana and Alberta. Let's start out with the northeastern U.S. and return to the icebox. Before we do that, yeah, look at those temperatures. Afternoon temperatures below minus 20 in Quebec. This is a nice little time lapse I made from the live feed from Caribou, Maine. This appears to be looking west, and you can see the temperatures on that METAR observation, minus 26 Celsius, which is minus 15 Fahrenheit. And of course, that is without the wind chill. Winds gusting up to 30 knots there, so that is very uncomfortable, I'm sure. And there's some of the wind chills. Normally, I don't cover wind chills on this channel because they can be a little bit confusing. They're sort of non-scientific. But today they're so extreme that, we should go ahead and post that. There is a combination of blizzard warnings, wind chill warnings across Maine, extensive problems with drifting snow this evening, and they've had a few communications issues here and there due to the storm, especially around Presque Isle. Not getting any data from there right now. And there are some of those temperatures down to the minus 20 range in northern Maine. And we work our way south, 8 degrees at Boston, 18 at JFK Airport. And what's interesting is you go all the way down to Florida, and they've got heat there up to the 80s. And Homestead hit 90 degrees earlier today. As we mentioned, lake effect snows are still ongoing, especially around Erie. They're expecting 1 to 3 inches of additional snow, and roads will be slick. And more snow down there in Ohio, into Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. That will be dropping snow as well through much of the evening. There's a look at some of that cold air advection stratocumulus through the day. You can see how it's forming right there on the Great Lakes and extending well inland, especially in the northeastern U.S. That certainly deserves a closer look. Mount Washington is located right in there. And we go forward. The cold air advection stratocumulus covering much of the inland areas, and also some mountain wave activity developing up there in New Hampshire. And we head into a cold night as the satellite imagery switches over to infrared. And with this cool down, we're going to be seeing the tropopause come way down to low levels. If we look up to the north, that's going to be this evening, probably right around the time you're watching this, a zone of tropopause heights down below 15,000 feet, heading right there into the northeastern U.S. And the coldest values will be probably right around in there. That's going to be between 6 and 9 p.m. tonight. And let me show you the SKU-Ts. So there's the high-resolution rapid refresh forecast for 2Z. It's going to be about 9 p.m. And we'll click on Western Maine. And there it is. Look how low that tropopause is. It's down to probably about 6,000 or 7,000 feet. That's all the stratosphere right there. So that could very well be touching the top of Mount Washington there. In fact, why don't we take a look at Mount Washington? We'll click on that, looking at the conditions about midnight, and yeah, the tropopause right down to 5,000 feet. All of this is the stratosphere. And if you had an ozone detector, that would be one way to verify that. Certainly some of the older research into troposphere folds did emphasize the use of increased ozone concentration. So moving down to the southeastern U.S., we get into some warmer air in Florida. As we mentioned, Homestead, south of Miami, reached 90 degrees, and that's the 5th day that they hit that temperature. Boca Raton recorded 88 degrees, but with that front coming down southward, there are marine advisories off of Boca Raton and West Palm Beach. Further up to the north, cold temperatures. They had that ice storm from Arkansas through Tennessee and Memphis. They've risen above 32 degrees shortly after this map time for the first time since Monday. One of the infrared channels was picking up that track of ice from just south of Little Rock there up through the Memphis area. Looks like some of it may have extended up into the Boot Heel of Missouri as well. In the southern plains, a big warm-up, some ridging extending through the state, and that old frontal boundary well to the south. The west coast of Mexico still getting north winds and some rather cool temperatures. In Texas, temperatures up to the 40s and 50s, but we are going to get some strong radiational cooling overnight, and with the ground being highly saturated, that's going to mean fog, and in some locations, that will be freezing fog. In the north-central U.S., recovering from that Arctic outbreak, you can see one little error there in the data, 54 degrees at Bismarck. The reason that that is an error is because they accidentally reported minus 12 as positive 12. And if we take a look at the raw data, the source of that error, that's it right there, where it's reporting 12 above, which is 54 Fahrenheit. How did that happen? I don't know. This is supposed to be an automated station. Typically, when there's an augmentation of the data by a human, you'll see A0 to A. But we don't have that. So I don't know how that happened. If any of you have any ideas, feel free to post in comments, because I'm curious. I did forget to mention some very cold temperatures up there. International Falls had minus 36 this morning, and the wind chills in Illinois were down to minus 32. All right, heading out into the southwestern U.S. Well, it was a wet month. Many areas around Sacramento got twice their normal precip. The mountains got 10 feet of snow during the month. And today, Northern California will be seeing additional rain. Some of that's already coming through the Bay Area. There's how it looked earlier this morning. Large area of rain moving into San Francisco and Sacramento. And it looks like already it's headed into the Sierra Nevadas. Not much of it left, and looks like the main dynamics associated with that probably in Nevada at this time. And it certainly looks chaotic across California, but there's no big honking atmospheric river involved. Still, though, looks like some instability there, and some of that mountain wave activity across the mountains. And I don't know how many pilots we have watching us, but February is notable for having the most clear air turbulence in the U.S., and that's largely due to the upper level winds being the strongest. Now, if we had moisture, this would probably be the stormiest month during the winter, but that's not the case. Things are a little bit drier, so we're mostly dealing with very strong westerlies across the U.S., and then as we get into March and April, those westerlies start moving up into Canada. Then as we move north into the northwestern U.S., things are a little bit stormy. We've got this trough. I want to call it a trough. The Weather Prediction Center has a front, and I don't really see much support for that. Not in the thickness field, and not in the temperature field either. It is a little bit warmer offshore, but inland, 50 degrees as well. So that's probably just some little mid-level disturbance working through the flow. Light snow showers have been moving through northeastern Oregon, some of it rain. Some footage of a dust storm in northeastern Oregon between Baker City and Pendleton near Interstate 84. And a lot of that's due to the fields being plowed. They grow hay, potatoes, onions out there, and now all that topsoil is being scattered by the winds. And that is in association with that disturbance along the Oregon coast. Further inland, we've got this plateau high across the Rockies and Great Basin area that is producing an inversion over Salt Lake City. You can see those fog icons right there. And if we go out there and drop a icon right over the Salt Lake City area, we can see that inversion right there. Temperature is around 31 at the surface, and then about 8,000 feet up, it is in the mid to upper 30s. Let's head up the coast, and we do see it as stormy off of Vancouver Island. A couple of lows out there, and with the approach of that low from the southwest, we're going to see winds come up in the Strait of Georgia later today into this evening. Wind warnings are in effect there, and as that crosses over into the Canadian Rockies, we are going to see the potential for freezing rain in Alberta this evening. That'll be from about Grand Prairie to Edmonton to Lloydminster. Heading up into Alaska, what do we have here? Just the usual. Very cold air along the north slope, some of it inland, temperatures below -20, and then down to the south a little bit more mild. And so I put a little weak stationary front going east-west through the state. Elsewhere around Canada, still plenty of cold air up north, but it does not look like that's coming south. In the Canadian prairies, it has moderated a bit. There's some snow out there in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, but as we head east, we get into some of that extreme cold weather. We have extreme cold warnings across eastern Ontario, and down in Toronto, there are wind warnings for winds up to about 50 miles an hour. And out there to the east, an impressive low heading up into Labrador. And it's stormy as well further out to the east, way up there in the corner, a deep low, actually near 945 millibars, and they're getting some very gusty winds around Reykjavik, up to 53 knots. And that's a look at it, strong southerly flow there. Reykjavik, as we record this, 28 gusting to 43 knots there with snow showers. And of course, that mysterious balloon from China has been making the news. It was sighted over Kansas City this afternoon. This was taken from the Weather Service at Pleasant Hill in Kansas City. And I worked up a track here based on the GFS. I selected a couple of different levels, 58,000, 60,000, and 62,000 feet. Looks like the one in the middle, the blue one, is what the balloon is actually following. So this starts out at Billings yesterday, You can see that tracks across Kansas City, but I think the balloon is actually moving a little bit faster, and it's really hard to get accurate data way up there in the stratosphere, so it is going to be a little bit of a ballpark. But it looks like tomorrow, very likely that trajectory will take it into Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, somewhere in there. So we'll keep an eye out for that. All right, let's go to the upper levels, 300 millibars. This is up near the jet stream level. We are moving into more of a progressive pattern, divided into a couple ridges, one way out there in the Pacific, a big one over the Rockies, a smaller one off the coast of California, and another one very flat, but it's out there south of Newfoundland. And then, of course, we've got the troughs, one there, one there. They're always in between the ridges, and so on. You can see that this one area of disturbed weather head of the trough supporting that inclement weather in Iceland, and this other trough right here associated with a cold air outbreak in the northeastern U.S. And, of course, we find the surface low upstream, or I'm sorry, downstream, out there that way and close to the jet. So that's where the warm conveyor belts, cold conveyor belts, all that focused right out there. There's that segment of the polar vortex, and let's check out what happens over the next few days. It keeps rotating up there, but heads back into Baffin Island, seems to weaken a little bit, and then we open up the Pacific. There's a couple of waves coming inland. We're picking up that positive EPO pattern, funneling moisture and disturbances right there into the western U.S. About the only big change comes up a little bit later. You can see some long wave ridging building across the eastern Pacific right there, and the flow turns a little bit more northwesterly through much of North America. So that could put us back into another cold pattern going into next weekend. That's still a ways off, but we have to keep an eye on it. You can see that little polar vortex segment rotating back to the south once again. So there could be another incursion of polar air into the north central U.S. or the Great Lakes area in about 10 days. The surface charts looking like this, and again, we're back to AWIPS. This is what a lot of the Weather Service offices are going to be using, charts very similar to this. We see that weather system heading on out there towards Newfoundland, and the strong cold air advection coming back in behind. And there's that polar high moving into the Midwest region, and pressure falls and troughing once again out there in Alberta. So moving forward, moderating trend across much of the country, a warm-up for the central U.S. going into Sunday and Monday, and then we see another little Alberta clipper trying to come south. That's going to be the leading edge right there. That connects back up into another wave, kind of a series of waves like that. So that'll be cold air poised to try to come south. Let's see if that does it. Yeah, it makes a little headway into Minnesota, North Dakota, but heads mostly to the east. See, there it is, sweeping out there towards eastern Canada, so they're not going to be out of the woods for a little while. Here comes another wave coming together for Wednesday. Let's see if that makes it into the central U.S. Yep, that goes a little bit deeper. That's the leading edge cold front on Thursday, and that comes all the way down to Missouri and, yeah, all the way down to Texas. At this stage, it does not look all that strong. Now, keep in mind that these are potential temperature values in Kelvin, so you subtract 273. That's a good number to keep in mind, to memorize, because that's how you convert Kelvin to Celsius. So 284 subtract 273, that's going to give you 11. So that's going to be about 52 Fahrenheit. So obviously that's not going to be very cold. However, this will have a little disturbance with it. That'll move across the southern states on Saturday and Sunday. But it looks like some more cold air filtering in. Now we're getting 272 to 276 down south and colder up to the north. But out there in the North Plains, looks like the downslope flow trying to get started once again. That's going to be a little nose of warm air. But up to the north, here's some more cold air building, 1040 millibar high across northern Yukon. That could be the start of some more Arctic air late next weekend. And looks like it's trying to come south there. Typically, when we see that air that far west in British Columbia, Yukon, that has implications for this part of the U.S., because that could funnel all the way down south. Now, that's still a ways out, but that will be something to keep an eye on. And you can see that cold front heading right there into the valleys, the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, and that's the last frame there. So we're not quite done with winter. Looks like more of it building up to the north for the 13th and 14th. So we will have to keep our eyes peeled as far as that goes. And in the meantime, lee side troughing there in Colorado, some warm air, maybe some moisture coming north into the south central U.S. So a little bit of a return to maybe early spring before this starts moving. Let's take a quick look at the dynamics. There's that deep low right there north of Maine associated with that area of cold air. Ridging in the Rockies, a little bit of ridging off the California coast, giving them a little bit of a break, and some weak troughing right there, a couple of weak short waves moving through Nevada, and our next system upstream. Let's move into tomorrow and see how that unfolds. That's going to be midday, so another weather system bearing down on Northern California. And as we get into the evening, that's going to be 0Z, jet max off of San Francisco, the jet stream running about like that. And of course, the divergent left front quadrant right there. That's going to be the bulk of the inclement weather right there. And then everything comes inland. Left front quadrant right there, around Sacramento on up to Marysville and Red Bluff. That's going to be midnight tomorrow night, and then the whole ball of wax comes inland, and another little disturbance on the backside sweeping in, and then things should start improving there for Sunday in Northern California. But stuff moves down into Southern California for Sunday into Monday, and then through the Rockies for Monday itself. And then we'll be dealing with this on the Southern Plains. This trough is kind of channeled. Looks like the better dynamics are hanging back right in there, but eventually they do work out. Yeah, there it goes. So we'll be looking at impacts in central and eastern Texas probably for late Wednesday into Thursday. Could be some storms or showers with that. And then we get this northwesterly flow going. That looks like a potent system rounding that ridge, and that digs on into Texas and Oklahoma. So some more interesting weather coming up for late next week across the southern plains and the southeastern U.S. that could be associated with some thunderstorm activity. Some big ridging, but that'll bring in probably some cold air into the northeastern U.S., and then things get busy out in the West Coast region. All right, so it looks like a busy couple of weeks ahead for many of us. We'll have to see how that works out, but this is a good time for me to stop. Somehow it's already near 7 p.m. as I record this, so the time has really flown by. I'm going to leave you with some footage taken in the middle of summer. It was about 90 degrees when this was filmed, so a little taste of summer. I do want to thank a few new supporters: Sondra Schwetman Art, Daniel, David Wagner, and Kevin H. Thank you very much for your support, and I do appreciate that, and that'll help keep the program going for a while yet. As many of you may know, these programs do take hours and hours every day, and that kind of takes away from the work on the books and software. So these Patreon donations do help a lot, and I appreciate that. Okay, I'll let you all go. Hope you have a great Friday evening and a great weekend. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.